Last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. In another case of taking care of their own, a former Vermont state trooper gets 30 whole days in jail for sex charges after molesting and taking nude photos of his 12-year-old stepdaughter. In Arizona this week, 6 CPS agents are on leave after failing to protect a baby who died from starvation while under their watch. Arizona foster kids are being packed into shelters and group homes for longer periods of time these days. And Arizona foster kids who age out of the system when they turn 18 are facing grim prospects, as half of them won't graduate, a quarter will become homeless, and more than half will be unemployed within a year or two of leaving the system. A new report for the Children's Advocacy Institute finds that a culture of secrecy in child abuse disclosure laws across the USA, which hides information about child abuse deaths when CPS was involved. In California, Occupy Oakland holds a protest outside of the county child protective industry, criticizing the agency for failing to protect children, targeting single mobs, and hurting minority families in disproportionate numbers. But police scare them away with a tear gas attack. In Kansas, the House of Representatives gives its final approval to a bill to give substantial consideration to the grandparents of children who have been removed from their parents' custody. And in Colorado, a lesbian becomes the first woman to be granted paternity in a custody battle. Child welfare advocates are criticizing President Obama this week after reversing his plans to ban children from working on dangerous farm jobs, claiming the president caved into election year pressure from farmers and Republicans. A new study by the Pediatric Academic Societies finds that black children are less likely to receive pain meds in an emergency room than white children, as well as usually spending an average of 6 hours longer in the ER. New research suggests that the amount of dangerous antipsychotics being fed to foster kids across the USA continues to climb. Another new study suggests that children who are born after the 42nd week of pregnancy are more likely to have behavior problems, including ADHD. And the state of Kentucky is still withholding child abuse death records despite court orders and promises from the governor for transparency. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overturns a lower court's decision, thus taking away the state of Nevada's immunity from paying damages in lawsuits involving foster children. In Connecticut, the legislature passes a bill that would allow rehabilitated people to have their names removed from the state's child abuse register. The legislature passes another bill that would ensure that foster kids get to visit with their brothers and sisters. And the Connecticut State Supreme Court is set to decide on whether or not the child protective industry can send foster kids to an out-of-state treatment center. In Texas, a federal judge rules that the state can't bar Planned Parenthood from a key health program until the group's lawsuit against the state is decided. In New Jersey, the child abuse hotline has been ringing off the hook since the child abuse hysteria caused by Jerry Sandusky's Penn State sex abuse scandal took hold. The New York Supreme Court overturns a lower court's decision, saying that a mother and father did not necessarily neglect their children by fighting in front of them. And a 6-month-old baby dies while in a Staten Island foster home. In Israel this week, a social worker is convicted of exposing himself to a 14-year-old boy. India gives its states the power to take over unregistered orphanages and child care homes. Children who live in foster homes in the Netherlands these days are 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer sexual abuse than they are in their own homes. In New Zealand, a real mother flips her cookies at a child, youth, and family office after baby stealers threaten to snatch her kid and give him to the father. And half of New Zealand's social workers are unqualified to help, and critics now want the mandatory registration for social workers to prevent well-meaning but untrained people from doing more harm than good. In Canada, an Ottawa man is facing charges after beating and choking a social worker who stole his kid. An Ontario couple who suffers from cerebral palsy fights to keep their month-old baby out of the clutches of the child protective industry, who believes that disabled parents aren't fit for the job. But fortunately, after a bit of media scrutiny, the child protective industry has a change of heart and allows them to keep the kid. In Australia, a children's advocate who worked as the CEO for an Aboriginal Children's Services pleads guilty to possession of child pornography and forging documents to keep his job. Australian CPS agents are making videos talking about how good they are in order to try to sucker in more people into their cause. And Australian nuns are denying that they removed up to 10 children of mixed race from their families in New Guinea during the 1960s. In England this week, a British social worker offers to falsify his child protective investigation reports by giving the mom a good report in exchange for sexual favors. The NSPCC is warning that the UK's child protective industry is returning kids to their abusive parents without the proper supports to keep them safe. British child support worker siphoned off £6,800 into her own bank account in order to pay off her loan sharks. A British couple is forced to restart their one-year foster care application because nobody could read the social worker's handwriting. And a 17-year-old foster kid gets to spend the next 14 years in a British prison after trying to kill his foster mother. In entertainment news this week, Usher is back in court with his ex over custody of their kid, but the judge orders them to sort out a custody agreement, and the Octomom signs on to do an adult film only one day after filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. In Alabama, the court is deciding whether or not to take away the foster children from a woman who is charged with animal cruelty. A Louisiana foster parent gets 25 years for sexually abusing girls in his care. In Colorado, a shoeless toddler who just happened to be a foster child is found wandering in the middle of the street. And in Kansas, an anti-abortion group obtains clinical records on 86 women from the trash of an abortion clinic. In New York, a 16-year-old boy is killed at a school for troubled teenagers after being put into restraints, and the parents can't get any answers as to why. In Oklahoma, the judge who was caught up in an abortion scam by collecting money from kids who she had passed off onto others is ordered to pay $70,000 restitution. In Oregon, a 2-year-old foster kid who was violently shaken, blinded, and brain damaged by her foster dad wins a $3.75 million settlement, making it the largest child welfare payout in Oregon history. And an aged-out foster kid from Missouri is killed by a drunk driver in a wrong-way crash. In Washington, 2 parents were arrested after trying to rescue their kids from the state's foster care system. A West Virginia father is charged with kidnapping after fleeing with his daughter before a planned visit by CPS agents. In Pennsylvania, a judge rules that CPS agents cannot dismiss allegations that they falsely accused parents of abusing a 4-month-old who had in fact sustained injuries from a stroke and congenital rickets. A former Luzerne County judicial candidate has a protection from abuse order filed against him by his wife. And finally, tonight in South Carolina, a teacher was arrested after grabbing a student and shoving him under the table as part of a Nazi Jew rant during an interactive lesson on the Holocaust and World War II. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK. Over and out.